everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have another book review for you, and that is for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge Black Spire by Delilah Dawson. This is one of the Star Wars canon books taking place during the sequel trilogy era, I think in between Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. And this is one I hadn't heard very much about. I had heard some good things about it for sure. But in general, this is one of the canon books that I never really heard all that much about. And so I was very curious to check it out and see what I thought of it. But I wasn't expecting like anything amazing. I figured it'd probably be a decent time, but since I hadn't heard it was like an amazing book or anything, I kind of kept expectations fairly low. And I have to say, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed this one a decent amount, and I think that it's worth checking out. So to get started talking about some good things with this book, of which there are several things to talk about, the first thing I have to talk about is the characters. I really like the characters in this book. You have Vi Marati, who is the protagonist of the book, the main character who you see here on the cover. She is sent to Batuu, specifically the Galaxy's Edge, the Black Spire outpost, which Galaxy's Edge is based on, in like Disney World and Disneyland and all that stuff. She's sent to Black Spire outpost in order to set up a resistance base there to kind of try to recruit people to the cause, and things like that. And so she recruits this group of people from Black Spire in order to kind of start building the foundations of this resistance base on Batuu. And I really loved all the characters that were involved in this. You have her, who she's a good protagonist. She's kind of a person that's put into this leadership role that she doesn't entirely feel ready for, and things like that. But I really enjoyed her character. You also have Archex, who is a character who previously was Captain Cardinal in the First Order. This book's kind of a sequel to the book Phasma, which I didn't actually realize before reading it. But I do think this book does a good enough job setting everything up, so you probably don't have to read Phasma prior to this, but I would imagine it would help a bit. But they have previous experience together, and he ends up leaving the First Order and being captured by the Resistance and things like that, and he is sent on this mission with her. And so they have an interesting dynamic of, she's very much pro-Resistance, and he is someone who's not necessarily in favor of the First Order anymore at all, but there's definitely this tension between the two of them that was really enjoyable, and I really liked his arc in particular across the book. He was maybe my favorite character in this book, although it's hard to say. I enjoyed a lot of the characters in this book. You have this other character named Creaky, who's like an alien. I forget the exact species. I can see it in my head, but this alien creature who's a lot of fun. She's like very expressive and fun to be around. You have a character named Zaid, I believe, who is Zaid and Archex kind of go back and forth as my favorite character in this book. I would say I really liked him. He's very kind of roguish type. He's not at all a fan of the First Order, but he's definitely like an interesting character, I guess. And you have a couple other, people that are forming this group and things like that Vi Marati recruits. You have other characters on the planet, like the crime boss type character, who's interesting. You have Kath, who's one of the First Order people. He's kind of the main villain of this book, and he actually, I thought was really interesting also, and I really enjoyed the dynamic that he had with all the other characters, especially Vi Marati, of course, because, she's the hero, he's the villain. So I especially enjoyed their dynamic that they had. But I really liked the dynamics between all the different group members. That was really the highlight of the book for me. To start kind of getting into some of the negative aspects for this book just for a minute, because I think it illustrates this point. This book took some time to really get me interested. It was kind of around the halfway point, which is when I was like, okay, I'm actually really into this book now. And that's because at that point, all the characters were starting to come together. And I think that the real strength of this book was those characters and their interactions and the way that they work together as a team and things like that. And so I think once that happens, that's where the book really hits its stride. And so I think that really speaks to the strength of these characters because, you know, the interactions between these characters and their dynamics they had together took this book for me from like a 7 out of 10 to something much higher than that. So I really enjoyed that about this book, especially just all the character dynamics, whether they were the good guys, the bad guys, whatever, they were all great. And I also really enjoyed the general storyline of this book a decent amount. I really like the idea of Vi being sent to this just random planet, that like this nothing planet that nobody ever really thinks about or whatever, and trying to set up resistance base there, but then the First Order still following her there, and her having to deal with that, I think was very interesting. That all was really cool. It's a cool concept, you know, seeing her trying to build up this resistance base from nothing, trying to recruit people to fight against the First Order. All that stuff was really cool. I also really liked the world building in this book. Of course, I've never been, unfortunately, to Galaxy's Edge. I'd love to, but I'm decently familiar with it, and so I was already somewhat familiar with the concept of Black Spire Outpost and of Batuu. But I think this does a really good job of immersing you into that world. It spends quite a lot of the first half of the book just getting Vi acquainted with the locals and their customs and the landscape, the place itself, you know, all that stuff. It makes it feel very real and lived in, and really gives you a strong sense of setting, which I really enjoyed. It felt like you really grew a connection with Black Spire Outpost, which I really appreciated. So character stuff, all good. The setting and the world building's really good. The plot's good. The only thing that I think was a downside to this book for me was that it took some time to really get going. And the first half of this book, well, I did really appreciate how it handled the world building aspects. All the rest kind of fell by the wayside a little for me. Like the plot, you know, took some time to really get going, and the characters, even though I really enjoyed Vi and I really enjoyed Archex and the other characters that were involved, you didn't have that group dynamic. You didn't have the characters all bouncing off one another and being like really interesting together. It was basically just Vi and Archex going back and forth. And while I enjoyed their dynamic quite a bit, that really was all that the book had to offer in terms of characters, at least for me, in the first half of the book. And so it just kind of took some time to really find its footing and really get me like engaged in the book. And the early portions are pretty slow. You know, she ends on this planet and she has to kind of find her footing, figure out what she's going to do, all that stuff. You get the tour of Black Spire Outpost, which I'm sure that it had to be written this way, but it does kind of feel like it's like, oh, here's all the different attractions at Galaxy's Edge, which is not something I minded at all. You know, I expected that going into this, considering it's a tie-in to that attraction, but it just felt kind of funny. But it was just kind of slow paced towards the beginning, but then it kind of builds over the course of it, and ends in this big, you know, action-packed kind of section, which I really enjoyed, and had a surprising amount of emotional weight to the ending. I found myself feeling very strongly for the ending of this book, which was surprising to me, because granted, I enjoyed the characters a lot and I enjoyed the plot a lot and this stuff, but this didn't seem to me like one of those books that really was gonna get to me emotionally. But I think it really did. It really, like, the end of this book really kind of got to me, which I also did appreciate about it, because I think that means that all of those aspects of the book were done well enough to get that kind of reaction out of me. And that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on this book overall. I had a great time with this book. I think more than I initially expected. As I was starting to read it, like I said, it took some time to get me into it. And so for a little while I was like, yeah, this is fine. And then over time, it just really kind of blew me away a little bit in the back half of the book. And so even though it's not like a 10 out of 10 for me or anything, I think it was really a very enjoyable book, especially in that back half. And I think that specific, you know, then onwards makes the book worth reading in itself, because it's just really, really well done and really enjoyable. So as far as a rating out of 10 that I'd give Black Spire, I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. Like I said, early on, it was kind of like 7 out of 10-ish, maybe 7.5 if I felt like being generous. And then as time went on, it just kind of moved up and up and up and up. And by the end of it, I was like, this Like, if I were just judging it by the back half of this book, it'd be like a 9.5 out of 10. But I do also have to take into account that the first half took some time to get going, so 8.5 seems fair to me, but it just really kind of drew me in as the book went along, and I think it was well worth reading, and I really enjoyed it a lot. And this book just left a very positive impression, even though I do have that caveat of first half was not super amazing. Like, the rest of the book was amazing, and I really enjoyed it a lot. So definitely would recommend checking this one out if you have not before. So that's pretty much it for my review. Let me know in the comments if you've read Black Spire and what you thought of it. If so, if you also really like it, if you didn't like it so much, I'm curious if any of you have favorite characters or things like that, considering there's a nice, fun cast of characters in this book. So favorite characters, anything like that. I think all that would be interesting to hear. So that's pretty much it for this video. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.